The Grumman F-14 Tomcat is an American carrier-capable supersonic twin-engine, two-seat, twin-tail, all-weather capable variable sweep wing fighter aircraft that was a mouthful. The Tomcat was developed for the United States Navy's Fighter Experimental Program, VFX, after the collapse of General Dynamics' Grumman F-111B project. A large and well-equipped fighter, the F-14 was the first American teen series fighters, which were designed incorporating air combat experienced against MiG fighters during the Vietnam War. The F-14 first flew on the 21st of December 1970 and made its first deployment in 1974 with the United States Navy aboard the USS Enterprise, replacing the McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II. The F-14 served as the United States Navy's primary maritime air superiority fighter, fleet defense interceptor, and tactical aerial reconnaissance platform into the 2000s. Low-altitude navigation and targeting infrared for night, or lantern, pod system was added in the 1990s, and the Tomcat began performing precision ground attack missions. The Tomcat was retired by U.S. Navy on the 22nd of September 2006, supplanted by the Boeing F/A-18EF Super Hornet. Several retired F-14s have been put on display across the U.S. Having been exported to Pahlavi, Iran, under the Western-aligned Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi in 1976, F-14s were used as land-based interceptors by the Imperial Iranian Air Force. Allowing the Iranian Revolution in 1979, the Islamic Republic of Iran Air Force used them during the Iran-Iraq War. Iran claimed their F-14 shot down at least 160 Iraqi aircraft during the war. Only 55 of these confirmed, according to historian Tom Cooper. While 16 Tomcats were lost, including 7 losses to accidents. As of 2024, the F-14 remains in service with Iran's Air Force though low in numbers of combat-ready aircraft due to the lack of spare parts. Beginning in the late 1950s, U.S. Navy sought a long-range, high-endurance interceptor to defend its carrier battle groups against long-range anti-ship missiles launched from the jet bombers and submarines of the Soviet Union. They outlined the idea of a fleet air defense aircraft with a more powerful radar and long-range missiles than the F-4 Phantom II to intercept both enemy bombers and missiles at the very long range. Studies into this concept led to the Douglas F-6D Missileer project in 1959, but this large subsonic aircraft would have limited ability to evade supersonic fighters or defend itself once it fired its missiles, and the project was canceled in December 1961. The Navy still sought long-range defensive aircraft, but with higher performance than the Missileer. The Navy was directed to participate in the Tactical Fighter Experimental Program with the United States Air Force by Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. We talk about him a lot on this channel. Who favored versatile aircraft that could be shared by both services, reducing procurement and development costs. To this end, he had already directed the United States Air Force to buy the F-4 Phantom II, which was developed for the Navy and could serve both as a fighter-bomber and an intercept aircraft, instead of buying more F-105 Thunder Chief and F-106 Delta Dart aircraft to fill each respective role. The TFX had adequate speed, range, and payload for the FAD role, and was designed primarily as a fighter bomber and interceptor that lacked the maneuverability and overall performance that the Navy expected. The Navy strenuously opposed the TFX as it feared compromises necessary for the Air Force's need for a low-level attack aircraft would adversely impact the aircraft's performance as a fighter. Their concerns were overridden, and the project went ahead as the F-111B. Lacking recent experience in naval fighters, the F-111's main contractor, General Dynamics, partnered with Grumman to provide the experience needed to develop a naval version. Weight and performance issues plagued the program, and with the F-111B in distress, Grumman began studying improvements and alternatives. In 1966, Navy awarded Grumman a contract to begin studying advanced fighter designs. Grumman narrowed down these designs to its Model 303 design. The name Tomcat, quote-unquote, was partially chosen to pay tribute to Admiral Thomas F. Connolly. As nickname Tomcat had already been widely used within the program during development to reflect Connolly's involvement, and now the moniker was adapted into an official name in the line with the Grumman tradition of giving its fighter aircraft feline names. Changing it to Tomcat associated the aircraft with the previous Grumman aircraft Wildcat, Hellcat, Tigercat, and Bearcat propeller fighters, along with the Panther, Cougar, and Tiger jet fighters. Other names considered were Alley Cat, considered inappropriate due to sexual connotations, and Sea Cat. Through this same period experienced in Vietnam against the more agile MiG fighters, demonstrated that the Phantom lacked the maneuverability needed to win any engagement. This led to the VFAX program to study a new fighter aircraft that would either replace or supplant the Phantom II in the fighter and ground attack roles, while the TFX worked on long-range interception role. Grumman continued to work on its 303 design and offered it to the Navy in 1967, which led to fighter studies by the Navy. The company continued to refine the design into 1968. Around this time, Vice Admiral Thomas F. Connolly, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Air Warfare, flew the developmental F-111A variant on a flight and discovered that it had difficulty going supersonic and had poor carrier landing characteristics. He later testified before Congress about his concerns against the official Navy position, and in May 1968, Congress stopped funding for the F-111B, allowing the Navy to pursue an answer tailored to its requirements. Free to choose their solution to the FAD requirement, the VFAX ended in favor of a new design that would combine the two roles. In July 1968, the Naval Air Systems Command, NAVAIR, issued a request for proposals, an RFP, for the Naval Fighter Experimental Program, VFX, called for a tandem two-seat twin-engine air-to-air fighter with maximum speed of Mach 2.2. It would also have built-in 20mm M61, Vulcan cannon, and a secondary close air support role. The VFX air-to-air missiles would be either 6 AIM-54 Phoenix or a combination of 6 AIM-7 Sparrow and 4 AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles. Bids were received from General Dynamics, Grumman, Ling Temco Vow, McDonnell Douglas, and North American Rockwell. 4 bids incorporated variable geometry wings. McDonnell Douglas and Grumman were selected as finalists in December 1968. Grumman's 303E design was selected for the contract award in January 1969. The design reused the TF-30 engines from the F-111B, though the Navy planned on replacing them with the Pratt & Whitney F-401-400 engines, under development for the Navy, along with related Pratt & Whitney F-100 for the United States Air Force. Though lighter than the F-111B, it was still the largest and heaviest U.S. fighter to fly from an aircraft carrier, a consequence of the requirement to carry the large AWG-9 radar and AIM-54 Phoenix missiles, and an internal fuel load of 16,000 pounds. The design service life was 6,000 flight hours, although this was later extended to 7,200 hours. Upon winning the contract for the F-14, Grumman greatly expanded its Calverton, Long Island, New York facility for evaluating the aircraft. Much of the testing included the first of many compressor stalls, and multiple ejections took place over Long Island. To save time and avoid cancellation by the new presidential administration, the Navy skipped the prototype phase and jumped directly into full-scale development. The Air Force took a similar approach with its McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagle. The F-14 first flew on the 21st of December 1970, just 22 months after Grumman was awarded the contract. Bunch of legends. The fighter reached initial operational capacity in 1973. The United States Marine Corps was initially interested in the F-14 as an F-4 Phantom II replacement, going so far as to send officers to Fighter Squadron 124, VF-124, to train as instructors. The Marine Corps pulled out of any procurement when the development of the Stores Management System for ground attack munitions was not pursued, and air-to-ground capability was not developed until the 90s. Firing trials involved launches against simulated targets for various types, from cruise missiles to high-flying bombers. AIM-54's Phoenix missile testing from the F-14 began in April 1972. The longest single Phoenix launch was successful against a target at a range of 110 nautical miles, or 200 kilometers, in April 1973. Another unusual test was made on the 22nd of November 1973 when 6 missiles were fired within 38 seconds at Mach 0.78 and 24,800 feet. 4 scored direct hits, 1 broke the lock and missed, and 1 was declared no test after the radar signature augmentation in the target drone, which increased the apparent radar signature of the tiny drone to the size of a MiG-21, failed, causing the missile to break track. This gave a tested success rate of 80% since effectively only 5 missiles were tested. This was the most expensive single test of air-to-air missiles ever performed at the time. Throughout the production, the F-14 underwent significant upgrades in missile armament, especially with the move to full solid-state electronics, primarily allowing for better electronic countermeasures and more space for the rocket motor. The AIM-54A Phoenix active radar air-to-air missile was upgraded with the AIM-54B 1983 limited use and the AIM-54C 1986 versions. The initial AIM-7E4 Sparrow semi-active radar homing was upgraded to the AIM-7F in 1976 and the M variant in 1982. The heat-seeking missile armament was upgraded from the AIM-9J and H to the Joint Air Force-Navy missile, the AIM-9L in 1979, and then the AIM-9M in 1982. The Tactical Airborne Reconnaissance Pod System was developed in the late 1970s for the F-14. Approximately 65 F-14As and all F-14Ds were modified to carry the pod. TARPS, Tactical Airborne Reconnaissance Pod System, was primarily controlled by the radar intercept officer and via an extra display for observing reconnaissance data. The TARPS Digital, or TARPS DI, was a 1996 upgrade featuring a digital camera. The digital camera was further updated beginning in 1998 with the TARPS completely digital TARPS CD configuration that also provided real-time transmission of imagery. In In 1984, plans were announced to replace the existing TF-30 engines of the Tomcat with General Electric F-110 GE 400 turbofans. An initial interim version just replaced the TF-30 with the new engine, retaining the original avionics. These aircraft were designated the F-14A+, which was changed to the F-14B in May 1991. 38 F-14A+s were newly built, with a further 43 converted from F-14As. The F-14D variant was developed at the same time. It included the F-110 engines with newer digital avionics systems such as a glass cockpit and capability with the Link 16 secure data link. The Digital Flight Control System, DFCS, notably improved the F-14's handling qualities when flying at high angles of attack or air combat maneuvering. While the F-14 had been developed as a lightweight alternative to the 80,000-pound F-111B, the F-14 was still the heaviest and most expensive fighter of its time. VFAX was revived in the 1970s as a lower-cost solution to replacing the Navy and Marine Corps' fleet of F-4s and A-7s. The VFAX was directed to review the fighters in the United States Air Force lightweight fighter competition, which led to the development of McDonnell Douglas FA-18 Hornet as roughly a mid-sized fighter and attack aircraft. In the 1990s, with the pending retirement of Grumman A6 Intruder and the cancellation of McDonnell Douglas A-12 Avenger II, Advanced Tactical Aircraft, or ATA, the F-14 air-to-ground program was resurrected. Trials with live bombs had been carried out in the 1980s. The F-14 was cleared to use basic iron bombs in 1992. During Operation Desert Storm of the Gulf War, most air-to-ground missions were left to LTV A-7 Corsair II, A-6 Intruders, and FA-18 Hornet squadrons, while the F-14s focused on air defense operations. Following Desert Storm, F-14As and F-14Bs underwent upgrades to avionics and cockpit displays to enable the use of precision munitions, enhance defensive systems, and apply structural improvements. The new avionics were comparable with the F-14D. These upgraded aircraft were designated F-14A Upgrade and F-14B Upgrade, respectively. By 1994, Grumman and the Navy were proposing ambitious plans for Tomcat upgrades beyond the D model to plug the gap between retirement of the A6 and the FA-18E through F Super Hornet. And the FA-18EF Super Hornet entering service, such as the Tomcat 21 and the cheaper Quick Strike version, and more advanced attack Super Tomcat 21. However, the upgrades would have taken too long to implement to meet the gap, and were priced in the billions. U.S. Congress considered this too expensive for an interim solution. A quick and expensive upgrade using low-altitude navigation targeting infrared for night or a lantern targeting pod was devised. The lantern pod provided the F-14 with a forward-looking infrared camera for night operations and a laser target designator to direct laser-guided bombs. Although the lantern is traditionally a two-pod system, an AN/AAQ-13 navigation pod with terrain-following radar and a wide-angle FLIR or forward-looking infrared camera, along with an AN/AAQ-14 targeting pod with steerable FLIR and a laser target designator, the decision was made to only use the targeting pod. Tomcat's lantern pod was altered and improved over the baseline configuration, such as a global positioning system, internal navigation system, GPS-INS capability to allow the F-14 to accurately locate itself. The pod was carried on the right wing glove pylon. The lantern pod did not require changes to the F-14's own system software, but the pod was designated to operate on an MILSTD 1553B bus not present on the F-14A or B. Consequently, Martin Marietta specially designed an interface card for the Lantern. The Radar Intercept Officer, or RIO, would receive pod imagery on a 10-inch programmable tactical information display, a PTID, or another multifunctional display in the F-14, rear cockpit, and guided LGBs, laser-guided bombs, using new hand controller instead of the right side console. Initially, the hand controller replaced RIO's TARP's control panel, meaning the Tomcat configuration for Lantern could not carry TARPs and the reverse. But eventually, a workaround was later developed to allow the Tomcat to carry Lantern or TARPs as needed. An upgraded Lantern named Lantern 40K for the operations of up to 40,000 feet or 12,000 meters was introduced in 2001, followed by the Tomcat Tactical Targeting T3 and Fast Tactical Imagery FTI to provide precise target coordinate determination and ability to transmit images in flight. Tomcats also added the ability to carry GBU-38 Joint Direct Attack Munitions, JDAMs. In 2003, giving it the option of the variety of LGB and GPS-guided weapons. Some F-14Ds were upgraded in 2005 with the Rover 3 full-motion video downlink, a system that transmits real-time images from the aircraft sensors to the laptop of a forward air controller, or FAC, on the ground. In the early 1980s, the Navy anticipated that Advanced Carrier-Borne Multi-Role Fighter would eventually be a long-term high-end replacement for the F-14 and A-6. Although this program was short-lived and was succeeded by separate efforts for fleet air defenses and deep strike attack, the latter would become the ATA program under which the A-12 Avenger II was being developed. In 1988, the service announced that it would produce a derivative of the Air Force's Advanced Tactical Fighter named the Navy Advanced Tactical Fighter, or NAT-F. That would eventually have become a navalized variant of the F-22, as the long-term F-14 replacement. However, the collapse of the Soviet Union resulted in a decline of defense budgets and in a steep increase in the unit cost of the ATF and NATF due to reduced production rates. With tightening budgets, the Navy chose to focus on its top aviation priority, the A-12, and canceled the NATF in 1991, believing that the F-14D would be viable for fleet air defense until 2015. However, the cancellation of the A-12 shortly afterwards due to cost overruns and technical problems resulted in the Navy launching the new attack aircraft program. The Advanced Attack, or AX, while the F-14 with Lantern and ground attack upgrades would provide some interim capabilities, with Grumman proposing even more F-14 upgrades in the 90s. Although the F-14D was to be the definitive version of the Tomcat, not all fleet units received the D variant. In 1989, Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney refused to approve the purchase of any more F-14D model aircraft, stopping production after 37 F-14Ds had been built. Although 18 more were produced by conversion of F-14As, giving a total of 55 F-14Ds. An upgrade to the F-14D's computer software to allow AIM-120 AMRAAM missile capability was planned, but was later terminated to free up funding for Lantern integration. While upgrades kept the F-14 competitive with other Teen Series fighters, Cheney stated that the F-14 was 1960s technology, despite an appeal from the Secretary of the Navy for at least 132 F-14Ds and some aggressive proposals from Grumman for a replacement. Cheney planned to replace the F-14 with a fighter that was not manufactured by Grumman. According to Cheney, the F-14 was a jobs program, and when the F-14 was canceled, an estimated 80,000 jobs of Grumman employees, subcontractors, or support personnel were affected. Yeah, Cheney was kind of a dick. I mean, not kind of. Cheney is just a dick. I guess that's why his first name is Dick. Aptly so. Fucking douchebag Cheney. The Navy would end up procuring the F-18EF Super Hornet as the interim strike fighter for the AX, which had become the AFX, Advanced Attack Fighter. Due to its added fighter capabilities, although the AFX itself would be canceled in 1993, bottom-up review. Cheney's cancellation of the F-14D was controversial and contributed heavily to Grumman's decline as a resulting acquisition by Northrop Corporation from Northrop Grumman. Alright, let's try to get through this without any lag. See if we can make it. The F-14 Tomcat was designed as both an air superiority fighter and a long-range naval interceptor, which enabled it to both serve as an escort fighter aircraft when armed with Sparrow missiles and a fleet air defense loitering interceptor role when armed with Phoenix missiles. The F-14 was designed with a two-seat cockpit and with a bubble canopy which affords all-round visibility, aiding aircrew in air-to-air combat. It features variable geometry wings that swing automatically during flight. For high-speed intercept, they are swept back, and they swing forward for lower-speed flight and increased endurance for loitering. It was designed to improve on the F-4 Phantom's air combat performance in most aspects. F-14's fuselage and wings allow it to climb faster than the F-4, while the twin-tail empennage offers better stability. The F-14 is equipped with an internal 20mm M61 Vulcan rotary cannon mounted on the left side and can carry AIM-54 Phoenix, AIM-7 Sparrow, and AIM-9 Sidewinder anti-aircraft missiles. The twin engines are housed in widely spaced nacelles. The flat area of the fuselage between the nacelles is used to contain fuel and avionics systems such as the wing sweep mechanism and flight controls, as well as weaponry, since the wings are not used for carrying ordnance. By itself, the fuselage provides approximately 40 to 60% of the F-14's aerodynamic lifting surface depending on the wing sweep position. The lifting body characteristics of the fuselage allow one F-14 to safely land after suffering a mid-air collision that sheared off more than half of the plane's right wing in 1991. Yeah, buddy. The lifting body characteristics of the fuselage allowed the one F-14 to safely land after suffering a mid-air collision that sheared off more than half of the plane's right wing in 1991. The level of badassery. The landing gear is very robust in order to withstand catapult launches and recoveries if needed for carrier operations. It comprises a double nose wheel and widely spaced single main wheels. There are no hard points on the sweeping parts of the wings, and so all the armament is fitted on the belly, between the air intake ramps, and on pylons under the wing gloves. Internal fuel capacity is 2,400 U.S. gallons or 9,100 liters in each wing. $690 gallons or 2,600 liters in a series of tanks aft of the cockpit, and a further 457 U.S. gallons or 1,730 liters in two feeder tanks. It can carry 260 U.S. gallons. External drop tanks under the engine intake ramps. There's also an air-to-air refueling probe which folds into the starboard nose. Just throwing that out there. The F-14's wing sweep can be varied between 20 degrees and 68 degrees in flight. It can be automatically controlled by its central air data computer, which maintains wing sweep at the optimum lift-to-drag ratio as Mach number varies. Pilots can manually override the system if desired. When parked, the wings can be overswept to 75 degrees to overlap the horizontal stabilizers to save deck space aboard carriers. In an emergency, the F-14 can land with the wings fully swept to 68 degrees, although this presents a significant safety hazard due to greatly increased stall speed. Such an aircraft would typically be diverted from an aircraft carrier to land base if an incident did occur. The F-14 has flown safely with an asymmetrical wing sweep during testing and was deemed able to land aboard a carrier if needed in emergency. The wing pivot points are significantly spaced far apart. This has two benefits. The first is that the weaponry can be fitted on a pylon on fixed wing glove, liberating the wings from having swiveling pylons fitted, a feature which had proven to add significant drag on the F-111B. Since less of the total lifting area is variable, the center of lift moves less as the wings move, reducing trim drag at high speed. When the wing is swept back, its thickness to chord ratio decreases, which allows the aircraft to satisfy the Mach 2.4 top speed required by the U.S. Navy. The body of the aircraft contributes significantly to overall lift, and so the Tomcat possesses a lower wing loading than its wing area would suggest. When carrying 4 Phoenix missiles or other heavy stores between the engines, this advantage is lost and maneuverability is reduced in those configurations. Ailerons are not fitted, with roll control being provided by wing-mounted spoilers at low speeds, and by differential operation of all moving ailerons at high speeds. Full-span slats and flaps are used to increase lift for both landing and combat, with slats being set at 17 degrees for landing and 7 degrees for combat, while flaps are set at 35 degrees for landing and 10 degrees for combat. An airbag fills up the space occupied by the swept-back wing when the wing is in a forward position, and a flexible fairing on top of the wing smooths out the shape transition between the fuselage and top wing area. Twin-tail layout helps in maneuvers at high angle of attack, while reducing the height of the aircraft to fit within the limited roof clearance of hangars aboard the aircraft carriers. The wings have two-spar structure with integral fuel tanks. Around 25% of the structure is made of titanium, including the wing box, wing pivots, and upper and lower wing skins. This is a light, rigid, and strong material. Electron beam welding was used in the construction of the titanium parts. The F-14 was designed for maneuver loads of 7.5 Gs, which was usually limited to 6.5 Gs in the fleet to extend aircraft's service life. 2 triangular-shaped retractable surfaces called glove vanes were originally mounted in the forward part of the wing glove and could be automatically extended by the flight control system at high Mach numbers. They were used to generate additional lift force ahead of the aircraft's center of gravity, thus helping to compensate for Mach tuck at supersonic speeds. Automatically deployed above Mach 1.4, they allowed the F-14 to pull 7.5 Gs at Mach 2 and could be manually extended with wings swept full aft. They were later disabled, however, owing to their additional weight and complexity. The air brakes consist of top and bottom extendable surfaces at rearmost portion of the fuselage between the 2 engine nacelles. The bottom surface is split into left and right halves. The tail hook hangs between the 2 halves and in an arrangement sometimes called the caster tail. The F-14A was initially equipped with 2 Pratt & Whitney TF30P412A or JTF-10A augmented turbofan engines, each rated at 20,900 pounds of static uninstalled thrust, which enabled the aircraft to attain a maximum speed of Mach 2.34. F-14 would normally fly at a cruising speed for reduced fuel consumption, which was important for conducting lengthy patrol missions. The rectangular air inlets for the engines were equipped with movable ramps and bleed doors to meet the different airflow requirements of the engine from takeoff to maximum supersonic speed. Variable nozzles were also fitted to the engine's exhaust. Late production F-14A had the improved TF-30P414A engines. The Navy had originally planned to replace the TF-30 with the Pratt & Whitney F-401, but the naval variant of the F-15's F-100 engine, but the plan was ultimately canceled due to costs and reliability problems. The performance of the TF-30 engine became an object of criticism. John Lehman, Secretary of the Navy in the 1980s, told the United States Congress that the TF-30 F-14 combination was probably the worst engine airframe mismatch we've had in years, quote unquote, and that the TF-30 was, quote, a terrible engine, end quote. 28% of all F-14 accidents were attributed to this engine. A high frequency of turbine blade failures led to the reinforcement of the entire engine bay to limit damage from such failures. The engine also had proved to be extremely susceptible to compressor stalls, especially at a high angle of attack during rapid throttle transients or above 30,000 feet, which could easily result in the loss of control, severe yaw oscillations, and could lead to unrecoverable flat spin. At specific altitudes, exhaust produced by missile launches could cause an engine compressor stall. This led to the development of a bleed system that temporarily blocks the frontal intake ramp and reduces engine power during missile launch. The upgraded F-14A+, later redesignated F-14B and F-14D, were equipped with the General Electric F-110 GE400s. F-110 provided a significant increase in thrust with a static uninstalled thrust of 26,950 pounds of force, installed thrust of 23,400 pounds of force, with an afterburner at sea level which rose to 30,200 pounds of force at Mach 0.9. The increased thrust gave the Tomcat better than 1-to-1 thrust-to-weight ratio at low fuel quantities. While this did result in fuel savings, the main reason not to use the afterburner during carrier launches was that if an engine failed, the F-110's thrust in full afterburner would produce yawing movement too abruptly for the pilot to correct. Thus, the launch of an F-14B or F-14D with afterburner was rare, while the F-14A required a full afterburner unless lightly loaded. The F-110 was also more efficient, allowing the Tomcat to cruise comfortably above 30,000 feet, which increased its range and survivability as well as endurance for time on station. In the overland attack role, this gave the F-14B and F-14D 60% more striking range, or 1/3 more time in station. F-14B arrived in time to participate in Desert Storm. With the TF-30, the F-14's overall thrust-to-weight ratio at maximum takeoff weight was around 0.56, considerably less than the F-15A's ratio of 0.85 when fitted with the F-110 engine, and improved the thrust-to-weight ratio of 0.73 at maximum weight and 0.88 at normal takeoff weight was achieved. Despite having large differences in static thrust, the TF-30 equipped with F-14A and F-110 equipped F-14B and D were rated at the same top speed. In 1996, two F-110 equipped Tomcat crashed after an afterburner failure. In the second crash, lighting the afterburner damaged the afterburner can's lining and led to an explosion. The Navy prohibited the use of the afterburner on the F-14A+, B, and D below 10,000 feet until GE could redesign the afterburners, a process that took over a year to complete. And that completes the F-14 Tomcat overview.